Hi guys, welcome to Graveyard Workshop. I'm Scott. Today we're going to put together a Twisty's 2.1 base skull kit from Triaxial Skull Labs. It's a pretty well made kit. Comes with everything you need except for the servos and the Lindbergh skull. Start out by unpacking everything. I'm going to show you what's in it. Get the base plate. A lot of little parts. I recommend that you separate out the components. The assembly actually takes place in 3 phases. So we're going to take out the spine or neck or central bolt section first, the central section first. Then there's all the control linkages. And what you have left are angle brackets and screws that are used to secure the skull to the base plate, this plate. So I recommend that you pick up a couple of magnetic holders like this one. Otherwise you're going to lose a lot of the little parts. I'm going to put all the angle brackets and small screws away till later. Control rods, linkages, put on there too. I'm just going to throw it all on there for now. In terms of parts, that's it. It's pretty simple. To assemble the base kit itself, you only need a few tools. A pair of pliers and a wrench, or 2 wrenches. A number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. And of course the servos themselves. These are high-tech HS425BB servos. Pretty nice, pretty beefy. Come with the horn kits. And that's about all you're going to need to actually assemble the base kit itself. To attach the Twisty's kit to the skull, and to finish the skull you're going to need a couple of other pieces. Start with a 2.5-inch hole saw. This is a really deep one. I recommend you get one of these. This one's by Lennox. They also are made by DeWalt. It's not terribly inexpensive, but worth it because it makes a very clean cut. You're going to need a Dremel tool. Any Dremel tool will work that has a nice high-speed adjustable speed to it. The tip that I use to bore out the sections of the skull is a number 115 Dremel tip. Works very well. You're going to need a 1/8-inch drill bit and either a 1/4-inch drill bit or a countersink. I use a countersink. And the Triaxial Skull guys want you to use a 1/16-inch drill bit and to get a tap and to tap out a hole for your ball joint, for this little ball joint. I don't like using taps with plastic. They're too easily pulled out. So I use a 1/16-inch threaded ball link that I buy online. They're pretty cheap. The difference is that this ball link comes with a little backing nut. You just drill the hole clean through, countersink the backside a little bit, and you can attach this ball link. Put a little caulk in the hole and it'll never show. And it's a very positive connection and it will never pull out. And that's it for the parts. Okay, now we're going to assemble the servos onto the plate. Plate orientation is there are 2 little dimples on the sides of the plate. The long side of the plate is going to be the front of the skull. You might want to fit this in the skull just to make sure. It's actually going to rest just above the skull when you put it all together. But you might want to test it. Make sure it's going to fit reasonably well. One thing I did want to mention is the servo horns that I'm using are the adjustable type. If your servos just come with a double horn like this, you're going to need to cut one end of the horn off so that it looks like this. The reason for that is because the horn needs to swing downward, and when it's up against the plate like this, if you don't cut off that piece of the other end of the horn, it'll bind and you won't get the movement that you're looking for. These are pretty easy to put on. First thing you want to do, again, make sure that you've got it oriented correctly. I'm using the Triaxial Skulls PDF file that they provided, and I just printed off a couple of pages from it. I'm literally just laying this right down on top of it. So in this case, the servo goes right here, kind of hangs off the end a little bit. Screws go through the other end, through the other side. Sometimes there's a little bit, you need to play a little bit. I don't always screw the brackets down to the servo all the way. It gives you a little bit of play. Sometimes they don't line up exactly the way you expect them to. Alright, so there's the first servo. I'm going to go ahead and put the other three top servos on. The fourth servo is the rotate servo. It's actually going to fit through the bottom like this. It does not have any brackets associated with it. You just screw it straight on. And you might want to, if you have rubber grommets for this one, you might want to include the rubber grommets. Note that for this servo, they only include 2 screws to screw it down. It appears to be enough to hold it in place, but you might think that it needs 4. If you do use 4, you'll run out of screws. So I'm going to go ahead and completely assemble this, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, here's the servos mounted on the control plate. 2 things I wanted to point out. One is the control plate's not perfectly symmetrical, so just as you're putting it together, keep in mind that there's an up and a down side to the control plate. The difference is in where a few of these screws go in and the servos are mounted. You'll figure it out pretty quickly because the servos just won't show up where you think they should according to this drawing. One other thing is these high-tech servos, the trays for the screws have a ridge in them. So this servo that we're using for the nod servo doesn't lay flush against the plate. So I ended up going ahead and putting the grommets in that came with the servos. And in addition, although the instructions don't tell you to do this, I went ahead and used 2 of the longer screws that come with the kit to mount this center servo for 2 reasons. One is it got the screw all the way into the plate. These plates are threaded. So it got the screw all the way in and through the plate. And the other reason, I'll show you later, is there's a little bit of a clearance problem sometimes with some of the servos, specifically the jaw servo and the linkage, when you're using the long screws that they provide for you to screw the skull to the skull plate, to the control plate. So this is what it looks like. Pretty much exactly as the drawing shows. You can see now how all of these horns are set up so that they will not bounce off of the plate. That's why I told you earlier about how to set them up. It's a little tricky when you're first configuring your servos. When you put power to them, you but once you get it done, it works just fine. And it pretty much guarantees that the servos won't burn out because they're pushing against the plate. And next step is to assemble the plate to that central rod that we made a little while ago.